Thanks, Rita. You're watching South East Today. Our top story tonight: Quishing, the latest scam costing people thousands. The BBC investigates the organised gangs behind a sharp rise in fraudulent QR codes.
Not only was I scammed once, it was twice, on the same day. Found it very difficult to then start trusting whenever I was out.
A man's appeared in court charged with assault after reports of a baby being aggressively shaken in Brighton. Piers is in the city for us with more tonight. The Kent Road plagued by deadly crashes. A mother's tireless campaign could lead to a change in the law. Unfinished business. We speak to Hove's Chris Eubank Jr. ahead of his hotly anticipated fight with Conor Benn 30 years after their fathers met in the ring. And blooming marvellous, a stunning spring display of new trees to honour a local botanist. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Ellie Crisell. Organised crime gangs are behind a sharp rise in scams linked to fraudulent QR codes, the BBC has learnt. Motorists in a number of areas across the southeast are being targeted by scammers tricking people into paying money to bogus websites known as quishing. Fraudsters stick fake QR codes in car parks and on payment machines. As Leanne Rinnie reports, in recent weeks, warnings have been issued by Hastings, Thanet, Ashford, Medway and Dover councils.
Samantha Watley is a busy care worker and was out visiting an elderly resident in Hastings when she got scammed.
I was running late, so I then went to go to pay at the parking machines. I didn't have any cash on me, so I used the QR code that they have. It gave me a website, so I tried to pay. I had to approve, I think, a penny or something, so I did all of that. Wouldn't go through. So I tried then at a different machine, had the same thing again, still had no success getting any parking tickets.
Samantha had no idea that the QR codes on the parking meters she tried to use were fake. She later discovered on her bank statements that she'd been signed up to 2 subscription services, costing her £120.
I was upset with myself because not only was I scammed once, it was twice, on the same day. I found it very difficult to then start trusting whenever I was out doing anything, double checking everything, because I'd always been very careful in the past. So, and this was something completely new to me. So yeah, it was a bit degrading, really.
Contactless payment hotspots like parking meters are now common targets for criminals who stick their own QR codes on legitimate signage. Back in 2019, the UK's National Fraud Authority received 100 reports of QR scams, but last year that figure jumped significantly to almost 1,400, and in total there have been 3,000 reports of QR code scams in the last 5 years.
Don't take a QR code for granted. If you do have to use a QR code though, most apps allow you to preview the URL before you follow it. And so if it's not a URL that you're expecting, it's taking you to somewhere slightly dodgy or generic, then just ignore it completely. And if in doubt, just use other means.
Fortunately, with perseverance, Samantha was able to get all of her money back. But figures show that victims lost more than £4 million to QR scams in 2023. Samantha says she hopes sharing her story will help raise awareness of a crime that could happen to anyone. Leanne Rinnie, BBC South East Today, Chatham.
Well, let's speak now to Catherine Hart. She's from the Chartered Trading Standards Institute. Hello, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining us. Scammers will always find a way, won't they? What do you make of this latest one?
Well, unfortunately, it's not new. We know that we've been using contactless payments for a while now, probably since COVID. And QR codes in themselves are brilliant. Unfortunately, the criminals use them, and they will then try and manipulate and obviously use them for their own malicious reasons. So, we do see them more and more readily now. They're in public places. We use them to potentially sort of download book tables. We use them for buying our electrical charging stations, and obviously the parking one, which you featured today.
So what should we be looking out for? How can you tell by looking at them or by going through the process?
First of all, look for the visual signs. Sometimes the QR codes are obviously been tampered with. Stickers over the top of the real ones. When you see the car parking ones, that normally they're either embossed onto the actual parking pay station itself, or certainly under some sort of plastic covering. The fake ones tend to be stuck on the top. So just have a look. Is it sort of a paper feel to it? And that's the sort of thing I'd be looking at. So visually, have a look at it. Secondly, when you've actually downloaded your QR code, check that web address. Is it actually linked to your parking platform that you think you are, like Ringo, that sort of thing? Check that out, and also check the information that they're asking for, because what we're seeing on the malicious sites is that they're asking for far too much information. So they're asking for a lot of your personal details, and that's where the actual crime comes into play, because it's data harvesting. And so they might scam you the first time, but the secondary scamming as well will happen.
Catherine, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much for coming on to chat to us about that today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A man's appeared in court this morning charged with assault and neglect after reports of a baby being shaken and aggressively handled in Brighton. Police were called to Bear Road in the city on Wednesday afternoon. A 50-year-old man was arrested and taken into custody. Well, Piers Hopkirk is in Brighton for us this evening. Piers, a very distressing sounding case. What more can you tell us?
Well, Ellie, I can tell you that 50-year-old Arthur Zagodson, who's from Holland Road in Hove, appeared before Brighton magistrates earlier today. He was charged with assault, ill-treatment, neglect, or causing unnecessary suffering to a young person. He was remanded in custody and will appear again at Lewes Crown Court on May the 9th. Now, as you said, this all relates to an incident that's alleged to have happened in Bear Road in Brighton on Wednesday around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, officers were responding to reports that a baby was being shaken and aggressively handled by a man. They arrived on scene. They arrested Zagodson. As part of further inquiries, they arrested two other people, a 36-year-old woman and a 38-year-old man, on suspicion of neglect. They've been subsequently bailed. Now, we understand that the baby in question is currently in hospital while assessments continue, and the police have told us this. They said, "We understand that this is a distressing report. We'd like to reassure the public that the baby's receiving care in hospital and that a full investigation is ongoing." Now, police say this would have been a busy time on Bear Road, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They're keen to hear from any member of the public who may have seen anything or indeed recorded anything on dashcam footage to get in touch.
Piers, thank you. Sussex Police took part in a national crackdown which saw officers targeting high street barbershops across England and Wales over 3 weeks. The operation, led by the National Crime Agency, saw officers raid premises in Crawley and Hastings. A number of vulnerable people were safeguarded in relation to potential modern slavery. Drivers are being warned over particularly long queues this Easter, with more than 19 million people expected to hit the road on Good Friday alone. The AA said Easter weekend being 3 weeks later than in 2024 will bump up that bank holiday traffic by 15%, as many people hope for warmer weather this year. National Highways has deployed traffic management system Operation Brock in Dover ahead of the Easter getaway period. Flashing speed warning signs could soon light up a stretch of road in Kent plagued by deadly crashes. In recent years, 2 people have lost their lives on Dumpton Park Drive in Broadstairs, including teenager Ethan Entwistle. Since Ethan's death, his mother Keena has been fighting for better safety measures. Now Kent County Council has told our Home Affairs correspondent Charlie Rose it's working with the local authorities to see if these crucial warning signs can be installed to help prevent more deaths and injuries.
A fun-loving teenager with a cheeky smile. Ethan Entwistle was killed in a crash here, 2 days before his 19th birthday. Since Ethan's death in 2023, his mother Keena has been calling for flashing safety signs to be installed at the site. And now it looks like she may get her wish, after Kent County Council told me it was investigating the feasibility of installing electronic speed warning signs on the road.
I know it won't bring Ethan back, but it could stop another accident where there could be a fatality, where there could be a serious injury.
Keena has been volunteering for a new speed watch group at the site, identifying drivers who go over the limit. Residents say the road is an accident hotspot.
See all the traffic coming past, see people driving along and the accidents, and I just want the road safer for everybody to use.
Especially at school times when, mums are taking their children to school, it's virtually impossible to cross the road.
Keena's also been involved in another campaign, calling for graduated driving licences, where teenage drivers could be banned from carrying passengers or making journeys at night. A petition with more than 100,000 signatures was handed into Downing Street last week.
All we're asking for is 6 months that those young drivers gain the road experience, because at present you can pass your test this morning and you can go on any road, go on the motorway, drive up to Scotland, do anything.
The government said while it's not considering graduated driving licences, it recognised that young people are disproportionately victims of tragic road accidents, and it was developing a new road safety strategy. But Keena said she and the other families wouldn't give up campaigning.
Well, Charlie is here in the studio with me. Charlie, the campaign for so-called graduated driving licences, that seems to be gaining momentum, doesn't it?
Yes, Ellie, and it's been backed by public health officials, the road safety charity Break and the AA. And in January, MPs held a debate on road safety for young drivers, and they were given this alarming statistic. Take a look. 1 in 5 drivers crash within their first year on the road, and it's the #1 killer of people under the age of 29. Now, 6 years ago, under the Conservative government, the Department for Transport announced that it was considering introducing graduated driving licences in England, which could see a minimum learning period for teenage drivers. But the assessment was halted the following year, partly because of the potential impact on young people's employment. Similar schemes have already been adopted in other countries, including the United States, Australia and Ireland. But the UK government says there are no plans to introduce one, telling me instead that they're developing a new road safety strategy to ensure the roads here remain among the world's safest, Ellie.
Thank you, Charlie. It is exactly 6:45, a reminder of our top story tonight. Organised crime gangs are behind a sharp rise in scams linked to fraudulent QR codes. So-called quishing involves those fake QR codes used most often in car parks, tricking people into paying money to bogus websites. Also in tonight's programme, a feast for your eyes as we visit some baby blossom trees planted to honour a Kent botanist and thriving 5 years on.
And it's been a sun-filled Friday and the warmth spills over into the weekend. But what about the run-up to Easter? I'll give you the full forecast later on in the programme.
sport now, and the countdown is on to one of the biggest fights of the year. Plus, Crawley hosts an elite-level ultra-endurance event. Well, James Dunn is live down at the K2 Leisure Centre for us this evening. Hello, James. Runners are going to be spending a very long time on that track behind you, aren't they?
Yeah, very long time indeed. It is the 24-hour UK Championships, when some of the country's best ultra runners will be going around and around and around this track from midday tomorrow. Now, among the entrants is Imo Body, who holds the record for the Three Peaks Challenge, running over and between the country's three biggest mountains in less than 7 days. The record on this track is more than 170 miles.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me about 24-hour track running is you are quite literally on the track for 24 hours, and at any given point you have that opportunity to stop. I think with trail running or kind of A to B point running, you've got that time to kind of contemplate how you're feeling, go through the peaks and troughs of the distance, whereas with 24-hour track running, you've always got that option and that opportunity to stop because you're on a 400-metre athletic track. So I think that is probably the toughest part of it.
Plenty of football too this weekend. Brighton and Hove Albion face Leicester, who will almost certainly be relegated this season. Crawley need a win against Leyton Orient if they're to maintain any hope of avoiding the drop from League One, and Gillingham host MK Dons at Priestfield. Now, a student who was told he may never walk again after becoming paralysed more than 2 years ago is now preparing to run the London Marathon. 19-year-old Tommy Rowlandson, who studies law at the University of Sussex, is preparing to join thousands of runners as he raises awareness about spinal cord injuries. Claudia St Basis went to meet him.
Watching Tommy Rowlandson run, it's hard to imagine that 2.5 years ago he was suddenly paralysed from the waist down after a cold caused inflammation of his spinal cord.
I first noticed when I was out with my friends that my legs felt abnormally sort of weak and quite shaky, but I kind of played it off and sort of carried on with my day. And then I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I tried to get out of bed and ended up collapsing, so I thought I should probably go to hospital at this point. So I took myself off to Brighton A&E, and yeah, they said I was becoming a paraplegic.
Tommy had developed acute transverse myelitis and was told he may never walk again.
For the first sort of few months I was wheelchair bound. I had no use of my legs at all. It's made me grow up a lot more. I think I've become a lot more mature because of it. Going through something that's quite traumatic, so to speak, it does change your perspective on life. I'm a lot more grateful for what I've got and who I've got around me.
Tommy was treated at the National Spinal Injuries Centre and one day woke to feel some sensation return.
I remember the first night when things started to come back, I was able to move my knee from my hip, and it was just the most incredible feeling ever. And I remember at the time I FaceTimed my parents and just showed them that I was moving my leg, and it was unbelievable. It was such a fond memory from such a bad time.
Slowly he improved, and he's now determined to raise money for the Spinal Injuries Association by running the London Marathon as quickly as he can.
I said originally under 5 hours, which I think is quite an achievable thing, but crossing the finish line is the ultimate goal.
Tommy still has some issues with his health.
I'm a big believer that there's always hope that things will get better, but for me, I've come to terms with my injury now. The remnant sort of conditions I've got left, I'm happy enough with, that I'm able to live sort of a full life.
Tommy originally intended to do the marathon in his wheelchair, but he recovered faster than expected and is determined to get fitter than ever. Claudia St Basis, BBC South East Today, Brighton.
Now, it's 2 weeks until one of the biggest fights of the year, the continuation of the Eubank versus Ben saga. Now, after long delays, Chris Eubank Jr. will face Conor Benn in London on April the 26th. Their bitter rivalry has forged a story of its own over the last 3 years, but it dates back decades to when their fathers fought each other with two iconic bouts in the 90s.
A rivalry that spanned generations. Eubank v Ben. Watched by tens of millions in the 90s, a new episode is finally about to unfold.
We have to settle the score. Now we have to just go in there and go toe-to-toe.
The fight was first scheduled in 2022, but Conor Benn was banned after failing a drugs test. He's since been cleared of wrongdoing. A report said the breach could have been down to an elevated consumption of eggs. But Eubank continues to call his opponent a cheat and was fined £100,000 for smashing an egg in his face in February.
The egg across Conor Benn's face was not an act of violence. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to embarrass him. I was trying to make an example of him. That moment in time with that egg in his face, that will stay with him for the rest of his career.
Their fathers, Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn, fought two gripping fights in the 90s, watched by millions, a rivalry so compelling fans wanted more. But as the saga continues, former world champion Eubank Sr. and his son haven't spoken for years.
Unfortunately, me and my father have a very complicated relationship.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of people go through these things. That's a part of life. Relationships change, things happen in life. My father was with me for a large part of the early stages of my career. So it was hard being my own man because I was always in his shadow. I'm trying my best to kind of get things back on track. But as of right now, I have no idea whether he wants them to be back on track, whether he wants to be at the fight, whether he will be at the fight.
Would you like him to be there?
Of course, he's my old man.
Even though you're not talking to your dad at the moment, it sounds like you still want to do that name proud.
Of course, the Eubank name as of right now is, it's above the Ben name. Conor is trying to push it over. Right now, the Eubanks are in front. One win, one draw. He's trying to even the score. I can't let him do that.
Now based in Dubai, he recently sold his house in Brighton, but says the city will always be his home.
Brighton I was born and bred in that town, in that city. It will always hold a special place in my heart. It's an amazing place. I think it's one of the best cities in the UK, and I always have a great time when I'm there.
With a huge undercard and tens of thousands of spectators, there's now just 2 weeks until a fight 3 years in the making. On April 26th, once again, it's Eubank versus Benn.
On to tennis now, and Brighton's Sonny Cartel has impressed with a debut win at the Billie Jean Cup today. The 23-year-old British #3 beat Germany's Jule Neumeier in straight sets in the Netherlands earlier today. After the best year of her career to date, she's also confirmed that she intends to play at Eastbourne this June. So, lots to look forward to this summer and beyond. For now, it's back to the track. I'll be here on Sunday when I imagine Imo and the other runners won't be looking quite so fresh, Ellie.
Indeed, some nice spring sunshine there, James, though. Thank you for that. And, of course, spring sunshine equals a beautiful blossom at every turn. Isn't it lovely out there? You don't have to go far in our part of the country to see a cherry tree in full bloom. And in Dane Park in Margate, some newer additions to the display are thriving. They were planted 5 years ago as part of the Thanet Urban Forest Project, and they pay homage to an extraordinary Kent botanist, as Sarah Smith explains.
Lining the paths of this Margate Park, the young cherry trees are letting us know that spring is truly here.
I hope people will be able to take some time out of their day to spend time with nature and be able to admire the cherry blossoms.
This Sunday, Peter Hastert is hosting a community walk here and inviting people to learn more of the man who's inspired him. Raised in Thanet, Collingwood Ingram became an authority on cherry trees, even earning the nickname Cherry. In the 1920s, his passion took him to the home of the finest displays. For centuries, Japan has been famous for its incredible blossoms, but 100 years ago, industrialisation and the cloning of trees meant varieties were being lost.
The trees behind me, as you can see, are the Tai hakus, also known as the great white cherry. And this was a lost species in Japan. When Cherry Ingram went to Japan, he realised that the species had become extinct over there.
When Cherry Ingram was shown a painting of the cherry, he recognised it as one he had in his garden at home in Kent, and he was determined to help.
He sent many cuttings back to Japan by sea, failed multiple times, and on the last-ditch attempt he decided to put some of the cuttings in a potato and send it via rail.
The cuttings took, and Japan had its Tai hakus back.
They call it sakura in Japan, when the cherry blossoms are at their absolute best. But it's only thanks to Collingwood Ingram and his Kentish gardens that this type of cherry is once again part of those glorious Japanese displays.
And now, along with another cherry bred by Ingram, they're here too, for everyone to enjoy.
And if I came back in 20 years, what would it be like here?
Well, I like to think that the canopy would have grown over and we'd be walking underneath the blossoms, and there'd be a lot more shade as well.
A sight Cherry Ingram would surely have loved. Sarah Smith, BBC South East Today, Margate.
Doesn't it just make you so happy? Well, let's see if the spring sunshine is going to continue. John.
Yes, for a wee while longer, Ellie, it will. What a fantastic day. Look at this beautiful scene earlier on across the lake. And yeah, felt like summer in Canterbury, watching the cricket, didn't it, this afternoon? But it felt like winter first thing in the morning. Temperatures were at freezing, specifically in Charlwood. And the reason I pick out Charlwood is because through the day, it warmed up and warmed up and warmed up. And you know what the warmest place was? Charlwood, making it the warmest day of the week across the southeast. Felt like summer. The warm weather will continue, as I said to Ellie, for a day or so longer, but there are signs of change through this weekend. We'll see a few showers arriving, and certainly as we get into next week, turning much more unsettled and cooler. This is where the change is coming from. Across Spain and Portugal, trouble is brewing, although not trouble if you need rainfall. That's the direction it's coming from. No rain tonight. It'll be cooling off again. Not as cold as last night. Not expecting a frost, but still quite nippy first thing in the morning. A few mist patches around. They'll soon vanish and it will soon warm up again. It's going to be another sunny and increasingly warm day. A little bit of cloud appearing out west late on in the day, but it will stay dry again. Temperatures up into the low 20s inland, a bit cooler around the coast. A splash of rain tomorrow night, 1 or 2 sharp showers. They'll move through and they'll introduce fresh air. So not so warm on Sunday, but still a usable sort of day. Looking further ahead, scattering of showers early next week, but then proper wet weather arrives by the time we reach Tuesday. So things getting cooler, things getting wetter. Maybe dry by Easter. Watch this space. Ellie.
Watch this space. The great British weather. Thank you very much, Sean. That's it from us for the moment. Rebecca Kenyon, though, is back at 10:30 with your late news update. Bye-bye for now.